Welcome to the Environmental Leadership Chronicles, a podcast brought to you by the California Association of Environmental Professionals. In this episode, we feature Claudia Garcia, who serves on the state board for AEP and is the director at large, as well as a liaison for the state board's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Committee. Alongside her, we have Chief Esparza, a dedicated DEI consultant working closely with the AEP State Board to foster inclusive cultures within the organization. We discuss integrating DEI practices within AEP and strategies for making inclusivity a cornerstone of professional communities. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Hi, it's Jessa, and my pronouns are she, her. And today we have two guests. We have Claudia Garcia. Claudia is on the state board for AEP and serves as director at large. And she is also the liaison for the state board's DEI committee. And then we also have Chief Esparza, who is a DEI consultant working with the AEP state board. So thank you both for joining today.
Thank you so much, Jessa. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And so, Chief, we'll start with you first. How are you connected, or how did you become connected with AEP?
Yeah. First of all, it's great to be here. It's great to share time and space with everyone and get to talk about DEI, get to tell a little bit about my story. I'm a storyteller. I love other people's stories, and we'll get more into that in a bit. But as far as the connection to AEP, this is something that I have been doing for the last, at least 5 years, 6 years, really, is looking at organizations, seeing who needs help, offering my help, what I can bring to the table and my perspective on DEI. And I was just looking on LinkedIn one day, and this job popped up, this contract gig, part-time, to help AEP, develop their communications and DEI facilitation process. And I said, sure, let me apply. And this was one of the most inclusive processes I've ever experienced. Learned later on that it was set up by Castillo Partners, who AEP has been working with for years now. And it was a wonderful process. It made me feel respected. It made me feel valued. That's a credit to both Castillo as well as the board themselves for deciding and aligning that this is a process they wanted to go through. And I went through the interview process, and not even a week later, I was at the AEP National Conference, or the annual conference. And that was my introduction. I got to see everyone, meet everyone at the conference. And what did they say? We don't throw you in the water to see if you can swim. We throw you off the cliff to see if you can fly. I think I did a pretty good job, and I think I nailed the landing too. But it was just wonderful to meet everyone, and to really, over the last few months, get to know AEP's approach to, as an organization, as well as to DEI. And to meet people like Claudia, like yourself, like Mindy, who I have a one-on-one with every week. And it's just a really great organization to be a part of. And I'm so, so grateful to be here.
I love that. I heard you were at the conference, and I didn't get a chance to meet you, but I didn't realize how close the timing was. That worked out really well.
It really did. It was great, though.
Oh, I love that. And Lamika Castillo, we've had her on the podcast really early on in its inception. And so we should have her back to give us an update. But yeah, she's her and her partner are wonderful.
Yes, they are. They're great.
And so, Chief, can you, obviously, like you said, like this is a space and are familiar with and passionate about. Can you give us some more information on your background? Like, how did you get to a place where you became a consultant, and this is like what you realized how you want to, spend your time in the world?
Absolutely. I would say, academically, I graduated with a bachelor's in political science from UCSB. I've kind of always been interested in this process of how do we make organizations better. I cut my teeth at UPS. That's a 100-year-old company. So, as a safety and compliance manager, how do you persuade people to do things safely in compliance? And they've been doing their job for longer than I was alive at the time. And so how do you do that? How do you make sure that you are building those connections and relationships to allow folks to work together to bring about those organizational goals? So that's a sort of, the academic sort of professional thing. But really, I like to talk about stories, and I like to talk about my life and how, this is all grounded in personal values. And I credit my grandmother. My Grandma Connie, she's 98 years old. She's from Michoacan, Mexico. She came to the U.S. when she was 6, and to Santa Barbara, actually, when she was 14. She started working in lemon packing warehouses back in the day. She had 13 children. Her first husband was killed in action in World War II. She's still alive over here. She lives with my auntie now. She's great. She still has a sense of humor. She still takes her cane and she tries to dance and do a little demonstration for us every now and then. But my grandmother is, she's a lifelong devout Catholic. She would go to mass during the week. She'd donate to Catholic charities any chance she got. And she would always leave her front door unlocked. And if you needed a place to stay, she got a couch, maybe a room if you need something longer. She'd always have food ready. She'd ask you if you want some coffee. She'd ask you if you want something. She baked cookies and cakes and lemon meringue pie. She actually won first place at the Lemming Festival here in Santa Barbara for that lemon meringue pie. But she always wanted to know, how are you? What are you up to? How is life? And so my grandmother always operated from a place of care. She always operated from a place of wanting to listen to people and give them a chance to share their stories. And if I look at my approach to DEI and how I've approached DEI for the last 6 years, this is really it. This is what my grandmother does. She leans into care. I tell people that at 98, she can't tell you the difference between Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latine, or any of the other terms that describe our ethnicity. She can't tell you LGBTQIAA2S plus. She can't tell you what that means. She doesn't know the frameworks, but she knows kindness. She knows care. She knows human needs and what human beings actually do need. She asks you to tell your story so she knows you better. And I think that that is something that is powerful in DEI. I think too often we do focus on vocabulary and saying, well, do they have the right words and the right feelings? Or do they offer care? Do they want to build relationships? Everyone knows my grandmother. People who have, we're talking divorces, breakups, people who knew the family when they were younger, they still know her phone number. They still know her by name. Everyone calls her Grandma Connie, whether she's their grandmother or not. It took a lifetime of experience for her to get there. I aspire to be that. And I think that there are some powerful lessons from her life that we can take to DEI and bring into the DEI space because it really is about human connection and about offering care at the end of the day.
That's lovely. And I think it's such like what a legacy to leave. I mean, aside from the award-winning lemon meringue pie, also important,
Right.
but to permeate that kindness throughout, you said like 13 children and then the network of grandkids and I'm sure great grandkids. And like you said, everyone she's touched in the whole community. And I think something you said is so helpful to think about. It's like through the actions, like acting with care and acting with kindness and treating other people that way, because I think some people are intimidated or afraid to say the wrong thing. And it's like you can worry more about offending someone instead of just like acting like with the, pure intentions of, like you said, like connection and kindness. And so I think that's it's a really inspiring message to hear about how you've come to where you're at today through your grandma Connie.
Yeah, yeah. I tell people all the time, she's the best of what God intended. If only I can be like her when I grow up.
Oh, that's so sweet. It's giving me chills. I love that. Oh, I love that. It's so lovely. And again, like you said you've learned a lot from Grandma Connie and through her actions. And so as a consultant and in your role, you get to work with so many different types of people. And I think I do consulting and I love it because I learn a lot from other people too as part of the process. And so what have you learned in your work from your clients and like as a DEI consultant, maybe what needs to be taught, what needs to be spread, like what people are focused on? Just, could share some of your learnings and your experience.
Yeah, for the last 8 years, I ran a nonprofit, and we're actually winding down the nonprofit. I think it's just reached the end of its purpose and the end of its journey. But this is a storytelling nonprofit, and we asked folks across the LGBT community, tell me your story, and we would pick a single theme. We would pick a single human concept that most of us can relate to, at least in some level. We might ask about family. We might ask about your clothing style. We might ask about your relationship to food, something very basic, right? And then we'd say, tell your story. Don't speak to me on behalf of whatever identity you represent on behalf of any community, because I don't want you to have to be a spokesperson. I want to know your individual story. How do you navigate family, your clothing style, food, mental health, the concept of boundaries? Tell me how you navigate that. And people would share these individual stories about their upbringing, about their growing up, about being an adult. And by telling us their human story, we would see deeper more nuanced, more richer, more full stories of identity than if we had asked them about their identity. Because when you
Mm.
ask people about identity, they lean into tropes, they border on stereotypes, they act like representatives, they tell you population level statistics. And that's all fine. That's great. That's wonderful. But that doesn't give us the corners. As someone once said, the unswept corners of our communities, right? I tell people, yeah, the what we all know about individual identities is like vacuuming the floor without moving the furniture around. Right? I got to get under the couch. I got to get under the chair, the table, whatever. I don't sweep around my dinner table. I sweep under the dinner table. But these are the stories that go missing when we only listen to these common narratives, these conventional understandings of any identity, whether that's race, ethnicity, gender, or so on. I want to know those deeper stories. If you've ever heard of the culture iceberg, look at the culture iceberg, the graphic. Above the waterline, it is a lot of stuff that we know. We can see it, we can hear it, we can taste it, right? It's consumption. But below that waterline, that's the interesting stuff. That's where you get into concepts of gender, concepts of modesty, concepts of cleanliness, relationships to elders. This is what shapes identity. It's not just checking a box. It's all of those different ways we understand and navigate the world. And so, my storytelling nonprofit, this is what we found. The academics call it the social determinants of identity. Not, I check this box, therefore you know my story. But let me tell you my story so you'll know what box I check. We back into these stories of identity by asking people about their common humanity. And when we do that, with people across race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, veteran status, citizenship status, body type, disability, and so on. We build on ramps to human connection and on ramps to empathy. Because if I tell you how I understand and navigate grief, and you tell me how you understand and navigate grief, we're going to be able to build a connection, a commonality between us, even if those ways that we experience grief are completely different. We will say, you know what? I understand you a little bit more. We start to humanize each other because a lot of these conversations in DEI can be dehumanizing because they rest on stereotypes, not on our stories as individuals. Communities are made up of individuals, right? It's just when we start to aggregate them that we start to get some commonalities, but we can never forget that no description, no top five narratives of any identity or any community are going to tell you the story of everyone in that community. And so this is how I approach DEI. It's through stories. It's through trying to build on-ramps to connection and empathy. It's not resting on the sociology, the history, the linguistics, the anthropology, and so on. All of that stuff is important when you're starting to look about the context of where people are and what they bring into any workplace or any organization. It's important to know that, but that's not enough. That's the second story to the house. We all want that two-story house. The first story is how we treat other people, that respect, that empathy, that connection, the listening to people, that knowing that I don't know everything about you just because I can see you. I might be able to describe you, but that doesn't mean that I know who you are. I don't know your values, your experiences. So I want to know more about you. I want to know more about your values. I want to know more about how we can connect and work together to move forward. I think there's an assumption in DEI that because we are professionals, often degreed, that we know how to do all that. And the truth is that a lot of us could use a refresher on how to build friendships and how to build relationships, right? There's nothing wrong with the refresher and learning how to do it all over again. And so that's kind of how I do that. That's how I approach DEI, and that's how I try to bring that to any organization or workplace. Because if you want to, see it in another term of something more technical, such as storytelling, it's qualitative data. We're doing research by sharing our stories.
Mm.
And if we can get people across race, ethnicity, gender, and so on to tell the same story about families or about grief or about leadership or about growth or about goals, now we can say, okay, we have 50 perspectives. Let's try to come up with a solution that addresses all 50 of them. That might impact some people more than others, but everyone's going to have access to it. It's going to benefit everyone. Let's lift all of these boats at the same time. And so that is called targeted universalism, where we look at a solution that is open to everybody, that lifts everybody, even though it might help some more than others. Just think about an elevator versus stairs. Everyone has access to an elevator. It makes everyone's life easier. And for people who are disabled, it's a godsend, right? And so that is what we try to do with these things. If we talk about family, everyone talks about family, then we can take that qualitative data and say, what about benefits? Are our benefits, does our work-life balance, does it address the way everyone experiences family? Can we make sure that all families are included in our approach? And that's how we do it. And I call it storytelling, and people say, yeah, but that sounds simple. I said, okay, fine. Social determinants of identity and qualitative research. That's what we're doing.
I love it. You got to brand it, got to have a big marketing name. It's
Right?
marketing at its finest.
Exactly.
I love that. I love, there's so many thoughts running through my head as, you're explaining this. And I think something I think about is when you like your talk, like the tip of the iceberg or like the dirty floor,
Yeah.
very relatable metaphor, is sometimes you see the differences, you can see or perceive differences rather than like finding commonalities. And so like the storytelling and connection, it's like that's how you can see like, oh, we're more alike than we are different at the end of the day. And
100%.
I really like the elevator example too. It's so like it's so spot on. And sometimes for those of us who don't have to worry about that or think about it, it's like just having it said out loud is like, of course,
Of
like,
course, yes.
it's so obvious when someone says it, but it's like when you're in your own little world and bubble and like you don't aren't necessarily thinking about other people and like how they're experiencing the world. So I think those conversations are so important to have. Um, and then, I mean, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but, based on your experience, like, how do you see DEI being woven into the workplace?
Yeah, real quick, the one who said the unswept corners of our communities, that was Dr. Nick Johnson, a wonderfully brilliant human, an excellent writer, a wonderful editor who used to work with our nonprofit. Nick is a wonderful human being out of Pennsylvania. But to answer your question, how do I see it being woven in? One of the things that I commonly see is this conventional understanding of what DEI is. And so, if you've read a couple essays, you could look it up, like, what do I do to start a DEI program? Go browse LinkedIn. There's essays on Medium and other places. You can look at books and read books or listen to audiobooks, and they kind of all say the same thing. And someone always tries to get a little nuance. And I end up seeing, like, influencers try to, build their brands. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're all trying to earn a buck. We got bills to pay, right? Okay. So, like, I have nothing, no critical thing to say about that. But one of the things that I see, and we're talking about storytelling is my approach, and the narratives of identity, which lean into the narratives of what DEI is and what it is not. But one of the things that I often see is this term cultural competency used a lot in DEI. Well, we need to be competent. We need to learn what other cultures are about. And we do that through, identity-based interactions and engagement. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but there are some very modern academic critiques of cultural competency that come about. For example, I am queer, I'm Mexican, so therefore I'm Latino or Latina. Like I said, you could. My grandmother says we're Mexican. You could debate Grandma Connie all you want, but do so at your own peril. Um, it depends on what room I'm in, whether I use Latino or Latina or Mexican. But if I were to say that, then you would know what boxes I check, but you wouldn't know my story at all. You wouldn't know my values. You wouldn't know how I've navigated life or how I see the world. But cultural competency says, oh, this is a Latino. Okay, well, these are the things that you need to know about Latinos. And all of those could be wrong about my life story. They could also be wrong about my needs or how I communicate my needs. And you could say the same thing about being a part of the LGBT community. Oh, this is a person who's part of that community. These are the things you need to look out for, or these are the questions you need to ask. That has nothing to do with me. These kinds of things came about from medical health, from public health, right? If you go to a doctor or a nurse needs to be able to treat their patients. Well, they started to do this because they were saying, well, how do we reach patients of different backgrounds? Well, let's teach doctors and medical practitioners, let's teach them cultural competency. And you see this in DEI as well. Well, if we're an organization, how do we make sure that we're reaching diverse communities? Oh, well, we need to be more culturally competent. So let's do these things or let's show these things and then we can reach them. Not true. So the thing about cultural competency is the question is, do you think it is possible to be competent, to be certified in knowing a culture? Can I, I'm not a woman, can I become competent in knowing what it is like to be a woman? Probably not. I am barely competent in what it's like to be queer, what it's like to be Mexican. I know what I know. I know my life, but I don't know. I can't explain all of our community to someone else. And so that's why the folks over the last 10 or 15 years have developed another concept called cultural humility. And cultural humility is about questions. I don't know what that term means. Could you explain that to me? I don't know what you need. Could you tell me what you need? What are you feeling right now? I know that I will never be able to know enough, and that's okay. I'll just keep asking questions so that I can serve you better. And cultural humility is taking over the medical health space and the public health space because it actually puts more power into the hands of the person in need. It lets them be the driver. You're the doctor, you're the medical provider, you are able to serve them. In conventional DEI, we lean on cultural competency. I know how women act and what women need in the workplace. I know what Black folks need in the workplace. I know what we need to do to reach all Latinos. And that's just not true, right? We know this. We know how what if you're a woman, you don't like to be said, well, this is how you must be because you're a woman. Hold on, that's a stereotype. It might be true in some cases, but that might not be what I need as an individual, right? And so this is why we go into cultural competency. And this is what storytelling can give us. If we tell our individual stories as representatives of ourselves rather than as representatives of our identity, then we can get deeper, richer, fuller stories about what I need as an individual. And now we put that together with other people from their backgrounds, and we come up with a solution that addresses everyone rather than saying, well, these are the five stereotypes that I need because this person checks this box. Or I can say, I don't know what they are. They didn't fill out the form, but let me ID it just by looking at them. That has nothing to do with values, has nothing to do with needs. Someone might be Latino and they might be an immigrant. Someone might be Latino and they might have history for 200 years in what we call the United States now. These are two different backgrounds, yet they check the same box. And if you said, well, these are the five things that we need to know to address this, I am competent. It's not going to give you the truth. It's not going to give you the reality of who this human being is in front of you. Human beings are complex and we have infinite diversity and infinite combinations. I stole that from Star Trek. Thank you to Spock and the Vulcans. But that's the core of what DEI is. We need to accept that there is infinite diversity and that we can't really clock somebody. We can't really say, oh, this must be your story. And so I think that that is important, is that we don't make those assumptions, that we do this groundwork of understanding this diversity, that we are humble and saying, I don't know, but you know what? If we don't have these practices of respect, practices of empathy, practices of listening and alignment, and how we share stories, vulnerability, and how we navigate the workplace or our careers and what we bring into the workplace. If we don't have that without punishment, like you said earlier, Jessa, people are afraid to say the wrong thing. Yeah, I'm sure, because a lot of us grow up in environments or in contexts where if you make a mistake, you're punished for it, right? You make a mistake and you're called out. You make a mistake and you fail. We need to create support systems to where I am invested in this long-term relationship as a professional, as a colleague, as a peer. And therefore, if you do make a mistake, I'm going to let you know, hey, just FYI, that thing, because it does no good to punish you, because then all you do is learn to not talk, to not be vulnerable, to not connect. What we need is more connection, not less of it. And so that's why the cultural humility aspect says, I don't know, I might make a mistake, but if you're willing to let me, I would love to develop this connection and this peer-based relationship, this colleague-based relationship between us. So let's do that. So again, to go back to the question, I see a lot of cultural competency that it's possible to learn, to read, to use the right words, and therefore bring about DEI when this is human work. And what a human needs, we are social creatures. We need connection, and we need more of that. And so I see less of the connection in many spaces and more of the sort of competency and testing and the individual accolades and achievements when this isn't about individual accolades and achievement. This is about how we connect with people and how we impact other people around us.
Yeah, I love that concept, or how you stated it, cultural humility. And I think leadership is just asking questions. It's how can I support you?
100%.
And it can be as simple as that, because I think on the other side of it too is some, like, there's legal concerns and boundaries in HR. But I think, if you say something as simple as that, and then on the other side too, it's, if you're an employee, you can talk to your peers and or leadership, like, this is what I need to feel supported. And, whether that's in the lens of like DEI and who you are in your personal situation, people might not know. And so you can ask and or tell them if they haven't asked. And then that will tell you a lot about on both sides what type of relationship you're building too.
Exactly.
And so for AEP has launched a DEI strategy. I think it was like, if I remember correctly, 2020. Or
That's
at least
correct.
that's what I remember it launching, but I'm sure conversations were happening well before that. And so Claudia is the liaison for the
Mhm.
DEI committee. Can you give us a little bit more of the background about when DEI started to be spoken about at AP and the context of like, okay, we need to like make this like part of our strategy?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Jessa. I think if I recall, the conversations began in 2019. And so at that point, we were just kind of exploring DEI and trying to broach it with the board. Primarily, it was Marie Campbell and I, and thinking about ways that we could become more diverse as a board, reach out to new members, and stay relevant, really, as an organization. And so in late 2020, we actually really stepped up our commitment to DEI and embracing DEI and launching the initiative. And this was communicated through our president at the time, Bill Halligan. And so in the communication, it kind of voices during that time, as you recall, everybody was reeling from all of the injustices that were going on. And so one of the things that really catalyzed the organization's commitment to DEI and acknowledging that commitment to our membership was the murder of George Floyd. And so although we're not a political organization, we felt like we needed to do something, and we were uniquely positioned to bring positive change in the field of planning, environmental planning overall, and throughout the organization. And so that's really when we started in earnest. Bill Halligan and Marie and I were the start of the committee, and it has evolved now with Mindy Fogg, our current president, and includes Vanessa Toscano, Elena Nuno, Mike Coleman, John Karamitsos, and of course, Castillo Consulting Partners, and now Chief. And so we're really excited to kind of take this forward and really start the initiative in earnest to create change in the organization.
And so I mean, you mentioned the forming a committee and
Mhm.
what actions did you have to take for the state board to have like a formal integration, and like how did you come together collectively, and like how are you tracking it? Like what
Mhm.
were the implementation steps, I guess, for lack of a better phrase?
Yeah, we really started at the ground level. Marie and I recognize that although we're like accomplished planners, we're not DEI professionals. And so we really sought help. And so it started off with a request for proposals. We wanted to hire a consulting firm to help us. And that's how we became we started to work with Castillo Consulting Partners. And then with, ongoing coordination with them, and specifically Lamika, we felt like as an organization, a nonprofit organization, our voice needs to be representing our membership. And so it really started with a survey. We surveyed our members. Who are our members? What are the current demographic of our members? How do they feel about DEI? How do they define DEI? And what do they want out of DEI? Do they want it in AEP? And overwhelmingly, the answer was yes. They want to see diversity, equity, and inclusion infused throughout the organization, but they want tangible change. They don't just want some one-off program or some one-off memo saying that we're committed to it. They want an actual plan, concrete goals to move forward. And so it was through those survey results that Castillo Consulting Group really helped us draft the strategic plan with specific goals. And each year since 2019, we've hosted a program at the conference every year, providing our membership with an update. What are we doing? This is our strategic plan. These are our goals. How do you feel about that? And kind of getting their feedback. And through their feedback and in collaboration with the rest of the board, really identifying the goals for each year.
And so, I mean, 5 years later, here we are. It goes from Marie and you talking about like, okay, we need to do this. Like, how are we going to do this as AEP? And to today, now having a full committee and a consultant as part of that committee with Chief. I know there's a lot of things you guys are working on and collaborating on together. And so, some things that I know you guys are leading are the affinity group. So, whoever wants to start, go for explaining what you guys are working on for the affinity groups.
You can take the lead if you like, Chief.
Okay.
We've been talking about a lot about this and kind of formulating it and identifying the types of groups we want to move forward with. But Chief's really been helpful and how we define that with AEP. Like we're a professional organization. We're not a specific company. And so we need to be broad in our appeal.
Well, yeah, 100% what Claudia said right there. As a professional organization, this is a different approach. And I've done DEI in the nonprofit space, in the strictly software tech space, in the construction space, consumer finance, and now bringing it to AEP, which is, of course, environmental planning is a completely other field, an area of expertise. And it's also a professional organization. So these are folks who may come to AEP for different reasons. Some of them may have a sort of environmental justice approach. This is their values. They want to make the world a better place. Other people may want to have a good job so they can provide for themselves and their families. That is also virtuous, right? That is those both of those goals are still moral and have merit. And yet we have to find solutions that bridge that gap between different folks and different approaches. And so we're also going to have a different mix of race and ethnicity and gender, experience, where people come from. And this is the core of what DEI is, especially if you think about, what a smarter person once said, that if you don't understand someone's behavior, you're probably missing some of their context. And so when we think about that in this context and think about affinity groups, let's try to create an approach to affinity groups that is not conventional, but allows people of different backgrounds and different regions. Geography is big with us, right? In the state like California, when people tell me a lot, from the East Coast, they're like, "Hey, I'm visiting California." I'm like, "We are like 5 states. Which California are you visiting?" Right? When they called the Bay Area Northern California, I'm like, there is a whole other state. We got like 200 miles until we get to Oregon. Like, right. So we have to account for all of these things. It's a big state. It's a diverse state, just in terms of the ecology, just in terms of the geography, let alone the people. And so affinity groups, our approach has really, we've been doing multiple talks about this, trying to align as a DEI committee so we can roll this out. And we want to focus on life experience and career stage. And, we did a lot of research into other professional organizations and how they do it. And life experiences and career stage are two very popular, very conventional for professional organizations. And I think they would allow us to build those connections across different groups of people, different experiences. When I talk about life experience, that does touch on things, the human experiences, like grief, like being new to your career, under 25, under 30, like being over 50 and more seasoned in your career. It does include being a caregiver or a parent or someone who has to care for others. It does include growing up in a rural area or living in a rural area, right? A lot of conversations, especially in DEI, it's a very urban focus and urban experience. And yet that leaves out so many people who came from different areas. And this is, color block in our experience as a nonprofit. We have had these focuses where a lot of LGBT narratives are focused on urban areas, but those narratives, what are the narratives outside of urban areas? And this is how we do this thing in storytelling. We change the narrative, we expand the narrative, so that way we can get to this point where everyone feels like they've not only had a chance to say their piece, but they feel a part of the work. And so when we look at career stage for these affinity groups, we are looking early career. That could be someone who's fresh out of college, or that could be someone who made a career pivot, right? It could be someone who's 40 years old and said, what I was doing wasn't serving me, but this does. And so how do we make sure that folks feel included in AEP and what AEP does? How do we make sure that folks who are near retirement or retired can still be members and still contribute to the conversation and still contribute to other members and how they're doing this? There's going to be a difference for people who work as consultants versus people who work in government. These are all different types of career levels and career stages, career areas, and we want to make sure that we are addressing the needs of different folks and that they feel supported through AEP as well as through their own individual pursuits. And so that's the conversation around affinity groups that we're having. How do we build cross-cultural collaboration between folks? How do we ensure that everyone is a part of this work, that everyone feels like they have something to contribute? Because the reality is everyone does have something to contribute. I know my own experience, I know my identity, but that doesn't mean that I know everything. That doesn't mean that I can't learn from someone else who doesn't share my gender or my sexual orientation or my disability status. Other people can still offer lessons because of their own experience. And that's a powerful thing about storytelling, right? Even Roger Ebert, who coined the term, he says movies are empathy machines, and someone else took that a level, a macro level, and said stories are empathy technologies, right? These are what allow us to feel emotions and to understand other people, even if we've never experienced that in our lives. And so I think that that is what we're doing with these affinity groups, is setting them up to develop these professional relationships, human connections, empathy, and support all through people's different life stages and different career stages. When it comes to, of course, student outreach and environmental justice fellowship, the two other things that we hope to roll out by the end of the year, we are allowing Castillo partners to show us their expertise in these levels and to offer what they can. So that way we have a more robust form of student outreach, that we reach students in college, coming out of college, that we reach that cohort to make sure that we can continue to grow the organization, right? Students are going to, be the future members of AEP. They're going to be doing this work as it expands, as California's, different policy regimes and different regulatory regimes change. The students are going to be fresh into that. So it's a two-way relationship. They show us what is new and what the values are coming up, and we show them our experience and knowledge about navigating this field in this area of expertise. So I am someone who's big on intergenerational storytelling, right? Older folks need to teach us, and we need to also teach them, right? You can be a mentor whether you're younger or older. And I think that that's something that the student outreach is going to impact AEP greatly as Castillo Partners develops that, looks more at what the context of, folks who are younger, Gen Z, and, or however you want to arrange the cohort, how do they navigate the space and what are their needs across the broad spectrum of experiences, and how can we incorporate that to AEP? How can we serve that so that way we can continue to grow our membership? And then the Environmental Justice Fellowship, Castillo has also offered to help lead that and help make sure that we are laying the groundwork for what has come out of different surveys of the members, different contexts of the world, like Claudia, mentioned in 2020, the way the world was and how we can actually be more responsive to the world around us and make sure that other folks understand this as well. And we can reach communities and those people for whom environmental justice is the reason why they got into this field. So 3 pillars: affinity groups, student outreach, and environmental justice fellowship. And that's what I know. And like I said, I've only been here a few months. I got on board in March. Claudia has been part of these conversations, so she knows a lot more. But I'm trying to catch up. I'm trying to make sure that I can provide my expertise and share time and space with everyone as best as I can. But Claudia, if I didn't mention everything, please feel free.
Sure. Oh, sure. No, that was great. Thank you, Chief, for starting that conversation off. I think the only other thing I wanted to add about affinity groups is that we're hoping to launch a pilot before September. So that's coming up quickly. So we'll share information out to the larger membership soon. And for student outreach, currently we have about 1,100 student members, which is huge. And it's grown cumulatively since 2020, when we decided during the shutdown, we decided to make student membership free. Because we felt that it was important to engage students. A lot of people were really hard hit during the pandemic. And so our charge now that we have this robust group of students is to how do we serve them? How do we provide them with the resources that they need? And so one of the things that we're doing as part of the D&I initiative is identifying actual student members to serve on the committee, students that want to be that voice, because sure, we can sit here and say, we know what students want, but do we really know what students want? We maybe have an idea, but they need to tell us what actually they need and what they need from this organization and how we can best support them so that they're transitioning into their careers after graduation. And so hopefully they stick around as members and the future voice of this organization as well. And
I'm sorry. With some of these initiatives, how does it work from the state chapter to the local chapters? Like, how are these connections being made?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so currently the state as a whole is made up of 9 local chapters. And so each chapter has a student outreach coordinator. And the state, Emma Haynes is currently the director at large in charge of student outreach. And so she has monthly meetings with each of those student outreach coordinators at the local level. She communicates the state's initiatives, and they work together to come up with goals and share ideas and come up with programming throughout the year so that we're connecting with students at all the different regions throughout the state. And so that's usually how the flow of communication is with the state.
Thanks. And I think too, as you're talking about this, I've been reflecting on, I've been doing the podcast for AEP since 2021, so 3 years. And part of the catalyst for the podcast was coming from the conversations around DEI and being able to highlight different careers in the industry, different people doing those different jobs, and hopefully someone looking and saying, okay, this person looks like me or has a similar story to me, and understanding the various pathways to the careers in the environmental industry and figuring out who to talk to, mentorship, connecting. And I think something you said, Claudia, is so important. It's like, this is not just words on paper. It's like, so going from, the concept to words on paper to all these like very tactical, tangible items that are being rolled out, like hiring Castillo partners, hiring Chief as a consultant, like having the committee, like really putting intentional actions behind the intent of the program, I think is very inspiring and hopefully helpful for other people listening to see like these things can be done and like get some ideas on ways to start the conversations or advance the conversations if they're not already doing that. And, to get involved with AEP and understand all the work that AEP does and that there's room for you at the table.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, I think our DEI initiative is like an octopus. We have our tentacles in everything that we do. And I think that's so important. And it doesn't have to be these, big efforts either. They can be just slightly small changes. One of the things that came out of the survey was that some of the members felt that state and local representatives of AEP were a bit cliquish. And I think that was like a sobering moment for all of us, because yes, sometimes when you're in at an event full of people, you gravitate toward the people that you know, and it's sometimes more uncomfortable for you to reach out to people that you don't typically talk to. And so one of the things that we did at the conference, now we're going to have people at our AEP booth, AEP representatives, to kind of have those conversations. What is it that you want to know about AEP? Do you want to know how we function? Do you want me to introduce you to people? Do you want to volunteer for us? And so we want to put it all out on the table. We are here to serve our membership, and we're trying to be more open. And this is one of the ways we're doing that.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Claudia. And I was thinking about that. I actually sat in on that meeting where those results were, and I never go to the board meetings, and I happened to sit on this one, and it was hard to hear. And
yeah,
but it was important though. I think that's where I think back to the surveys, like when we had Lamika on the podcast very early on, and the survey was just like starting to be designed. And so coming back and, being able to take that information and actually change it and come up with ideas like, okay, we're hearing you, we hear you, this is what we're going to do. And like to have that baseline to measure against as you go forward and like can see your improvement, I think is just really just gives a lot of, I think a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for AEP and how they're approaching this and like always trying to be better and give more and more and more to the members. Like the organization really, really cares about its members and future members, potential members.
Yes,
be a member.
Yes, all of them.
On that note, we're about at time. So before we get into the wrap up rapid five, I just want to see if there's any other thoughts or anything. I know it's like a big topic and a lot to talk about, but I want to see if there's anything that we missed.
I think, I think Chief, you did an excellent job. I think just, if to all the listeners, if you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to coordinate and listen to your ideas and feedback.
Yeah, 100%. That's what it's about. DEI is this thing. It is sort of fluid. There's so many different approaches to it. And calibrating to your organization, knowing where your folks are at, knowing where you want to get to is so important in this work. And so it is a little bit less solid of a framework than a lot of folks might like to think or might like to tell you. But what it means is that just like any human relationship, just like any group of humans, it's going to shape itself. It's going to mold to it's context, and we are more than happy to do that. We want to do that to make sure that folks feel like they are included in this work, that the diversity of the organization and beyond is part of what we do and how we approach things and how we come up with solutions, programs, the conference itself. We want to make sure that everything is a part of it. This is such a wonderfully fluid calculus, and it's less certain than people think, but that's what makes it fun.
Thank you guys both so much for joining, for your time to talk about this and share all the work you're doing. And Chief is a first-time guest of the podcast. You have to be initiated with our wrap-up rapid five.
Okay, all right.
First time, not last time. I'll put that out there. So first off, what is your favorite daily habit?
My favorite daily habit. Oh, this is a good one. Well, there's actually two.
Just
two
one.
habits.
We're very no.
Okay,
two
fine.
is fine.
Two is fine. It is either my morning coffee or tea or my evening wine. It is because this is like the screens are not on yet, or the screens go off. This is my official habit, my ritual of disconnection.
I love
It's like,
that. And
some people wait for the sunrise or the sunset. I need that coffee or that glass of wine.
it's the start and end, the bookend. I love it.
Exactly.
3 things you'd bring to a deserted island.
Oh, this is okay. I'd bring comics. I'm a nerd. I'm a comic book fan, or a novel, something like that. Something like Star Trek or sci. I have a tattoo of the Incredible Hulk right here on my forearm, and I mentioned this in the conference. I see the Hulk as a metaphor for mental health. It's not something that you fix or silence. It's that when you can understand that you can be two parts and still whole, that's when you realize your superpower. So I love comic books. I would need something like that, even if it was an audiobook, but that involves like 2 things.
It's breaking all the rules, bending these. I love it. I'm here for it.
Or just kind of expanding the narrative.
There's the marketing again.
Right?
I love this.
So I would definitely bring something to read. I would probably, gosh, I'm a sucker for Oreos. I would bring some Oreos. I don't know if that's healthy, like to bring long to an island, but
I feel like we have a very similar palate so far based on what you've shared.
Okay, right. Yeah. I need some Oreos or something like that. And I mean, my favorite dessert is actually boysenberry pie. It's hard to get. It's a California original, like really, really amazing thing. And then a third thing, goodness. I'm a Taurus and an introvert, and so like a lot of the things that I think about are like comforts and rituals and habits. So I probably need a good blanket. It's on an island, so like I don't know if it's like northern or like to the equator, but I need a nap.
I'm feeling all of this. Okay. What is your favorite environmental policy?
My favorite environmental policy. Oh, this is an interesting one. This is a good one. And I'm going to say this as somebody who came from Santa Barbara and think about the sort of urban planning aspect of being from Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara's had a general plan since the 1926 earthquake. After that, the civic leaders decided to say, hey, let's do this differently. Let's not just do it haphazard. We're going to do something very specific. And growing up, I heard a lot of criticisms because it limits growth, it limits development, it limits creativity. But as someone who's 42 and has grown up here and has family, one branch of my ancestry goes back to the 1780s in Santa Barbara. We haven't left. I'm an 8th generation Santa Barbarian. To think about how beautiful Santa Barbara is and how these view lines of the mountains and the beach are so protected because of this general plan, because development has to happen along these corridors and in this specific district. There's a reason why people come here who have never been here and they're like, wow, this place is really pretty. I'm like, yeah, it was planned out 100 years ago.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, and I think I look into the history as like one of the first like general plans, I think, or it's significant in its impact. But that is something that it affects the living environment, and that is something that I've long respected, because when I go other places and I visit and I see, I'm like, wow, you have a whole coastline here, and there's like no access to it. Imagine if we had access to this, but they had a different economic context back in the day, so they developed differently. I love the Bay Area, go to San Francisco all the time, and I just think about the San Francisco coastline, the Oakland, Alameda coastline, and how much of that could be accessed if something was done differently decades ago.
I'm sure all of our planners out there listening have a lot of thoughts on this topic.
I know. I apologize if I stepped on Joe's.
Claudia, speaking of.
It was industrial development.
Right, yeah, it is, and it powered the rest of the state, of course. Like, so, like, you can't like look down on it too much, right? Everything has a reason. Santa Barbara just got lucky for whatever reason. And every time I go to the Bay Area, it's just so gorgeous. It just the layout, the geography of it, and God bless everyone up there who's doing their best to make sure that everyone's taken care of, given its industrial history. Given the things. Why is Oakland named Oakland? Because it had a lot of oak trees, and a lot of those are gone now. But how can you still preserve access to nature and ensure that people are served as they come up and as they grow there, and as everyone keeps saying, Oakland raised me. You want to make sure that all of that is taken care of, because people really do take their hometowns to heart.
Yes. And then I was like, we're getting into a whole new podcast, which I love. Favorite flora or fauna?
Favorite flora or fauna? Ooh, goodness. Okay, so again, Taurus, we like, comforts and things like that. So I like flowers that are fragrant. I do like flowers that are fragrant. Give me a stargazer, a stargazer lily, like those are so fragrant, and like everyone knows what those are, and they end up like in every like hotel lobby or whatever. But if not that, like jasmine, it just has such a wonderful scent in the summertime. There's some actually out here out of my window, and when I open that window, I just get a whiff every now and again, and I'm like, that tells me life is good. If you can stop and smell the jasmine every now and again, right? There's a lot fewer things to complain about or to think about when you got that.
Yes. And then finish this thought. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Wouldn't it be cool if? Oh goodness. I told you my grandmother, her first husband was killed in action, but she has one child, my auntie from that husband. She has 12 from my grandfather, who was a cement mason and responsible for a lot of foundations in Santa Barbara. Those 13 kids went off and had 110, 120 grandkids. Most of them live here, but not all of them. Wouldn't it be cool if we could have everyone in the same spot one time?
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, both of you. Thank you, Chief, for your inaugural podcast, for the AEP podcast, at least your inaugural visit. And then Claudia, thanks for joining and sharing all the work that the AEP committee is doing. It's really great to hear all the progress that's being made.
Thanks, Jessa. It was really great to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Jessa, and thank you as well, Claudia, for allowing me to share time and space and tell a little bit of my story, and for allowing me to learn a little bit more as well about both of you, just from sharing time and space with you. This is the core of what I love about DEI, is that we get to tell stories through all these different ways and just find out more about people through those stories.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to be updated when new episodes are released, and leave us a review to let us know what you think. It also really helps us to share the podcast with others who may enjoy learning about the environmental industry. If you want to submit a shout out or any feedback, please send an email or voice memo to podcast@califaep.org. The email again is podcast with an S, podcast@califaep.org.